Some crimes just hang in the air. They sit there, unresolved, a dark cloud over a town, a family, a whole state. You hear about them for years, people talk, people wonder, and then, sometimes quietly, something shifts. A tiny crack appears in the wall of silence. A new lead surfaces. An old piece of evidence gets a second look. And suddenly, it feels like the air changes. The case moves from unsolved to on the brink. It feels like the next piece of news, any day now, could be the one that finally explains everything. For a lot of people, that case right now is the Delphi Murders. It's about two young girls, Abigail Williams and Libby German, who were killed in Delphi, Indiana, back in February 2017. Their deaths shocked everyone. The details were sparse, the clues were frustratingly vague, but there was one thing that kept the hope alive. Libby, one of the girls, managed to record something on her phone. She got a picture of the suspect. She got some audio of his voice. For years, that was all we had. A blurry figure, a few muffled words, and a whole lot of questions. But then, things changed. In late 2022, after years of silence and dead ends, an arrest was made. A local man, Richard Allen, was charged with their murder. He's now in jail, waiting for his trial. The case isn't solved yet, not officially. Not until a jury decides or he pleads guilty. But with an arrest, with a suspect named, and with the legal process moving forward, it feels closer than almost any other major unsolved crime out there. It feels like we are on the very edge of finding out what really happened that day on the Monon High Bridge. Let's go back to the beginning to understand why this case feels so urgent right now. It was February 13th, 2017, a Monday. It was an unusually warm day for Indiana in the middle of winter. School was out for President's Day break. Libby, who was 14, and Abby, who was 13, decided to go for a walk. They lived in Delphi, a small town with around 3,000 people. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, or at least knows their family. It's quiet, it's safe, or at least it was supposed to be. The girls were dropped off by Libby's sister, Delphi German, near the old Monon High Bridge. This bridge is a local landmark. It's an abandoned railway bridge that stands high over Deer Creek. It's a popular spot for walking, for taking pictures, for just hanging out. The girls plan to walk the trails. Kelsey dropped them off around 1:35 p.m. They were supposed to be picked up later that afternoon by Libby's grandfather, Mike. Mike went to pick them up at the designated spot, but they weren't there. He waited. He called, no answer. This wasn't like them. They were good kids. As the hours passed, worry turned into real fear. It started getting dark. The family called the police. A massive search began. Hundreds of volunteers, local law enforcement, state police, they all converged on the area around the bridge and the trails. Everyone held onto a desperate hope that the girls had just gotten lost, or maybe they were hiding or playing a trick. But deep down, everyone knew something was terribly wrong. The search continued through the night, a cold, dark, and anxious night. Then, the next day, February 14th, Valentine's Day, the worst possible news came. Around noon, searchers found the girls' bodies. They were located on private property, close to Deer Creek, not far from the bridge. The details were kept quiet to protect the investigation and, frankly, to protect the public from the full horror. But it was clear, the girls hadn't just gotten lost, they had been murdered. The shock in Delphi was immediate and profound. How could this happen here? Who would do something like this? The police immediately knew they had a very serious case on their hands. There was no clear motive, no known suspects. But they did have something unique, something almost unheard of in a murder case like this. They had Libby's phone, and on that phone, Libby had captured evidence. She had taken pictures. She had recorded video. And, crucially, she had recorded audio. One of the images was grainy. It showed a man walking on the bridge behind the girls. He was wearing a blue jacket, jeans, and a hat. He was walking with his head down, hands in his pockets. He became known as Bridge Guy. There was also a short audio clip. In it, a man's voice could be heard saying, "Down the hill." This phrase would echo through the years of the investigation, a haunting and chilling piece of the puzzle. This evidence, while incredibly valuable, also made the case so frustrating. You had a picture of the killer, you had his voice. In theory, that should make things easier to solve. But it didn't. For years, the investigation seemed to stall. The initial sketch of the suspect, based on witness descriptions, showed a younger man, perhaps in his 20s or 30s, with a small goatee. Tips poured in. Thousands of them. People from all over the country called in, convinced they knew who Bridge Guy was. But none of it led to an arrest. The initial fear gave way to a persistent ache in the community. People looked at strangers differently. They kept their kids closer. The police kept trying. They held press conferences, they released new details, hoping to jog someone's memory. They changed the suspect sketch more than once. At one point, they released a sketch of an older, much different-looking man, which confused everyone. Was it the same person? Was it two people? Law enforcement later clarified that the second sketch was likely the suspect, replacing the first one, but the uncertainty just added to the frustration. The entire time, the audio clip down the hill was analyzed over and over. Experts tried to clean it up, to make it clearer, but it remained elusive. The blurry photo of Bridge Guy was scrutinized by millions of people online. Everyone had a theory. The internet became a hotbed of armchair detectives, all trying to crack the case. While some of this attention helped keep the case alive, it also created a lot of noise, a lot of misinformation, and a lot of pain for the families who had to sift through constant speculation. The years dragged on. 2017 turned into 2018, then 2019, 2020. The girls' families never gave up. They kept fighting for answers, for justice, but the hope began to dim for many. It felt like the case was destined to become another cold case, a permanent stain on the history of Delphi. The initial excitement around the unique phone evidence faded into a quiet despair. Everyone knew the picture, everyone knew the voice, but nobody knew the name. The police, however, never truly stopped working. They just went quiet, they stopped holding press conferences as often. They stopped releasing new information. This silence, while frustrating for the public, was also a sign that something was happening behind the scenes. They were following leads, re-examining evidence, slowly building a case. And then, it finally happened. On October 26, 2022, nearly 6 years after the murders, Indiana State Police announced an arrest. Richard Allen, a 50-year-old man who lived in Delphi, was taken into custody and charged with 2 counts of murder. The news sent shockwaves through the community, and indeed, through the entire true crime world. A local man, someone who had lived right there in the very town where the murders happened. Someone who had likely walked past the memorial for the girls countless times. Who was Richard Allen? He worked at the local CVS pharmacy. He was married. He lived a seemingly normal life. He was not on most people's radar as a suspect. The initial reaction was a mix of immense relief and disbelief. Relief that an arrest had finally been made. This disbelief that the alleged killer had been hiding in plain sight for so long. The details of how investigators finally zeroed in on Allen were slowly revealed, though many documents in the case remained sealed. It wasn't a single smoking gun piece of evidence. It was a painstaking accumulation of small clues, patiently gathered over years. One of the key pieces of evidence that emerged in the probable cause affidavit, which was initially sealed but later briefly unsealed, was a bullet. A single unspent .40 caliber bullet. This bullet was found between the bodies of the 2 girls at the crime scene. It was a crucial clue. And when police executed a search warrant at Richard Allen's home in October 2022, they found a .40 caliber Sig Sauer pistol. This pistol was later tested, and investigators determined that the unspent bullet found at the crime scene had cycled through Allen's gun. This meant the bullet had been loaded into his gun even if it wasn't fired. This was a major breakthrough. But there was more. When police interviewed Allen, he initially denied being on the trails that day. But during later questioning, he admitted that he was indeed on the trails on February 13th, 2017, the day of the murders. He said he was there to watch the fish. He claimed he saw the girls, but did not interact with them. He also said he saw another man on the trails that day. This admission directly contradicted his initial denial. There were also reports of Allen making confessions to his wife and his mother during phone calls from jail. These confessions, described in court documents, included him admitting to the murders. However, the details of these confessions and their context are still subject to legal challenges and interpretation. The defense, as expected, is fighting hard against these claims, arguing that Allen was coerced, confused, or not in a sound state of mind when making those statements. The case against Richard Allen also relies on other factors, his physical appearance, for example. While the first sketch released by police showed a younger man, the second sketch, the one law enforcement later said was likely the suspect, showed an older man with more features that could potentially align with Allen. In the Bridge Guy photo, while still blurry, many now see a resemblance to Allen, particularly with the blue jacket and hat. The voice on the audio down the hill is also being scrutinized, though voice analysis can be tricky evidence in court. Where Allen lived in Delphi. His property was not far from the trails. He was familiar with the area. He would have known about the bridge, the trails, and the secluded spots. This local connection is often a strong indicator in these types of crimes. It points to someone who knew the lay of the land, someone who could blend in. But the defense isn't giving up. They are challenging almost every aspect of the prosecution's case. They argue that the evidence is circumstantial. They point out the lack of DNA evidence directly linking Alan to the victims. They question the handling of the crime scene, suggesting that crucial evidence might have been contaminated or missed during the initial chaos. They highlight the changing sketches, arguing that they show the police were unsure of their suspect for years. And they claim that Alan's confessions were not made freely, that he was under immense pressure and suffering from mental distress during his incarceration. They also argue that the bullet, while found near the bodies, was unspent and therefore does not definitively link Alan to the act of killing. The defense also brought up the possibility of a cult being involved in the murders, suggesting that the crime scene showed signs of ritualistic killing. They claim that key evidence, including blood and symbols, were found at the scene that pointed to an occult group, and that investigators had ignored these leads. This theory has been met with skepticism by prosecutors and the judge, but it shows the lengths the defense is going to create doubt. This is why the case is so actively on the brink. An arrest has been made. A suspect is in custody. Charges have been filed. But the legal battle is just beginning. There will be pretrial motions, arguments over what evidence can be presented to a jury, and intense scrutiny of every detail by both sides. The legal process is meticulous and often slow. The defense will challenge everything: the validity of the search warrants, the reliability of the DNA analysis or lack thereof, the chain of custody for physical evidence, and the circumstances surrounding any confessions. They will try to poke holes in the prosecution's narrative, aiming to create reasonable doubt. The trial itself will be a major event. Jury selection will be incredibly difficult in a small town like Delphi, where virtually everyone knows something about the case. Finding impartial jurors will be a huge challenge. The judge will have a tough job managing the proceedings, ensuring a fair trial while dealing with the intense public interest and media scrutiny. The sealed documents in the case are also a big part of why it feels like we're on the cusp of more revelation. Much of the evidence, the detailed probable cause affidavit, and other legal filings have been kept under wraps. This is often done to protect the integrity of the investigation, to prevent witnesses from being influenced, or to avoid tainting a jury pool. But it also means that the public doesn't know the full story yet. When these documents are eventually unsealed, or when the evidence is presented in court, it will shed much more light on what truly happened and why investigators believe Richard Allen is the killer. The reason this case stands out as closest to being solved is precisely because of this stage of the legal process. It's not just an active investigation with leads, it's not just a cold case with renewed interest. It's a case where a suspect has been identified, apprehended, and formally charged. The evidence, even if debated, has been deemed strong enough by a grand jury and a judge to proceed to trial. The machinery of justice is fully engaged. This isn't like the Zodiac Killer, where new theories surface every few years but never lead to an arrest. It's not like John Bonnet Ramsey, where DNA evidence is being re-evaluated, but no specific suspect is currently in custody and facing charges. With Delphi, we have a name, we have a face, we have a set of charges. The focus is now entirely on presenting that evidence in court and getting a resolution. For the families of Libby and Abby, this stage of the case brings a complex mix of emotions. There's a sense of hope, of course, that justice might finally be served, but there's also the renewed pain of having to relive the worst day of their lives over and over as the details are laid bare in court. They have carried this burden for so long. An arrest is a huge step, but a conviction is the ultimate goal, and even then, true closure is often elusive. It won't bring their girls back, but it might bring some peace. For the town of Delphi, a resolution would mean healing. The murders left a deep scar. For years, the community lived with the fear that the killer was still out there, possibly among them. Knowing that someone has been charged, and that the case is moving towards a conclusion, can start to mend some of those wounds. It's about reclaiming a sense of safety and trust. And for the wider world, for all of us who follow true crime, the Delphi case represents a powerful testament to persistence. It shows that even the most frustrating, seemingly unsolvable cases can break open. It highlights the dedication of law enforcement officers who work tirelessly for years, often without public recognition, to bring answers to victims' families. It also shows the power of even the smallest pieces of evidence: a blurry photo, a few words on an audio recording, when combined with relentless investigative work. We are watching in real time as the pieces of this puzzle are finally being put into place. We don't know what the final outcome will be. The legal system is complex and trials can be unpredictable. But the fact that we are at this point with an arrest made and a trial looming makes the Delphi murders truly the closest unsolved crime to being solved right now. It's not a question of if we'll get answers anymore, but when and how definitive those answers will be. The truth is waiting, just over the hill perhaps, and we are all holding our breath, waiting for it to finally emerge.